Go ahead, put it on real tight. Hope you brought your best tonight. They say they got the fireworks, yeah, they say they got the show. Here around the chutes, you're the best, so let's go.
This is Texas Toast. I'm your host, Miss Helen. Kick back and enjoy as we toast the best from Texas.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Texas Toast. I'm Miss Helen, and we have a special guest on this week's episode, a very super duper talented singer-songwriter with a twist on this new project, this new album that he has. I want to say hello and welcome to Dallas Burrow. Hello, Dallas.
Hey, Helen, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I have had so much fun getting to know you through your music and prepping for this, and your music is such a gift. I am thoroughly enjoying it. But in doing my research, you come from a deep heritage in music. Your dad was a songwriter, right?
Yeah, definitely. I was raised around a lot of good music, and Dad's always been a poet and a songwriter, and so that's something that's in my blood.
Obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so you grew up in New Braunfels, in that area?
Yes, ma'am. Yep. New Braunfels, and there again, the whole Central Texas area and this whole region is just has a really rich and deep history of great songwriters and music in general. So yeah.
So you actually, it sounds like to me, you probably absorbed and took in a lot, obviously, with the gift and the talent that you have.
Well, I think there's something in the water around here, kind of.
True. That's so true. So you had an album that you released in 2019 called Untitled Southern Wind. I actually fell in love with all of those songs as well, but it did have an impact nationally as well as internationally.
Yeah, I mean, it did pretty well, considering it was my first full-length solo record, and released independently. But had a really good team behind it, and it was on the charts over in Europe, and got to number 4 on the alt country chart here in the States, and so you never can tell what something like that's going to do. But so I was definitely pleased with how well it did. Yeah.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to check that out. We're going to talk in depthly about the new album, but Southern Wind it has some really good stuff on that. So as you're cruising through your music career, you are friends with Charlie Crockett. Y'all work together a lot, and then Bruce Robison came into your life.
That's right. Yeah, I've known Charlie for several years. He and I met. Actually, we were both kind of traveling and just both sort of young gypsy kids up north of the Bay, in northern California, and just hit it off, became friends, and we we've written songs together and done shows together and stuff like that, and yeah, and then so I was up in Colorado. I was doing some shows with Charlie, and Bruce happens to be Charlie's manager, so it was one of those deals where I made the record Southern Wind in Nashville, and was trying to figure out what my next logical step was as far as my next project was concerned. And I had, in the back of my mind someplace, this notion that it would be really, a great deal to work with Bruce, but really, I had I hadn't met him before, and so I didn't know if there was any way to be able to pull that off. But it was definitely in my mind. And then just the way it happened to be, Charlie introduced me to Bruce up in Steamboat, Colorado, during the Steamboat Music Fest a couple of years ago, and so all the pieces just kind of fell together. So it was, it worked out really well.
Well, and you have a unique project. You didn't just release a self-titled album, but we'll get to the whole logistics of it and the production of it. But you've got 14 songs on it. I'm sure you wrote all of those or co-wrote.
Yep, wrote them all. The only co-write on the record is the last track on the album, and it's called Outlaw Highway, and it was a poem that my dad had written, that I turned into a song. I set it to music, and it just eked its way onto the record. Dad kind of, he's always encouraging me to to write, of course, but also to, he's got a bunch of stuff that that's really good that he'd like to have see the light of day. So he brought me that poem one afternoon when we were in the middle of making the album, and it didn't take me long to figure out how to turn it into a song that I liked a lot, and I'm really proud that I could include something that I worked on with my dad on the
Yeah.
record for sure.
That's awesome. So let's talk about when you went to the bunker in Lockhart and Bruce Robinson's producing you. And let's talk about the equipment that was used. It was a 2-inch analog tape, throwback.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. It's like, it really is like going back in time. I've said it before, but it's true. It's like a time capsule out there. All the equipment that's used is vintage, and recording the tape is a really unique process. I mean, especially in this day and age, so much of what you hear coming out has been recorded digitally, which there's a lot of advantages to technology as far as what you can do with computers and so forth. But so to record to 2-inch analog tape in a true old-fashioned kind of way, it makes you approach the whole recording process differently, and so you get all the musicians in one room, and you've got to sit there. And whereas in a digital recording, you can record one instrument at a time, really effectively, and then you can go back and fix little things. With the analog process, the best way to go about it is if you can get it all in one foul swoop the first time and not have to mess with it after that. And so that's what you're shooting for. And so you get all the musicians together, and you really work on the arrangement and work on the vibe and the feel of the song, get the groove right, and decide every little nuance of how you're going to sing it, and all those different details. You want to get it all sorted out, and working with Bruce on that stuff was just so cool, because he's such a masterful songwriter. And so when he, heard something that he didn't think was quite right or wasn't quite there, he'd come in like, kind of like a father figure, and just stop everything and sit down right in the middle of all of us and just go, okay, this isn't right. What are we going to do? And start just working it out. And so, I mean, it was a great experience. And so, yeah, I'm just really pleased with the way it all turned out.
Yes, it's definitely a masterpiece. And to think that, you're so young and to do something so throwback like that. But to me, listening to your music, it's like you just have this old soul.
Well, I think a lot of that, my parents are older. And so the music I grew up with was the old classic, whether it was songwriter stuff or, more soul and rock and roll and whatever I was listening to with my folks, or even old country. It was always kind of the old stuff, the good stuff. And I think being raised by parents who are a little older, you sort of develop a kind of a sort of maturity that maybe other kids don't get. So I don't know, but in any case, I do like kind of old-fashioned storytelling and sort of vintage sounds and the classic approach to songwriting and recording. I think is all good stuff. So.
And it reflects in your music. So tell me about how many musicians you had in the studio, and some of those that, the instrumentation, the instruments that you had. I hear various ones, some not so typical, but that's what makes it so unique. So tell me about the musicians.
Yeah. So the core of the band that plays on it is Sterling Finley on the bass, playing mostly upright bass. He plays some electric bass too, and sings a lot of the harmonies. And he's my regular bass player in my touring and traveling band that I play out with. And Sterling comes from a pedigree of music. His dad, Kent Finley, is in the Country Music Hall of Fame. He started Cheatham Street Warehouse and the songwriter circle there in San Marcos. So Sterling grew up around, can't help George Strait and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Townes Van Zandt and Todd Snyder and countless others get their start. And so that was all a part of the culture of the way Sterling grew up. So to have him in my band and on my record and his involvement just in my music in general is a real pleasure for me. Then on the drums, we had Josh Blue. Josh I'd never met prior to the recording. He's actually Bruce's regular drummer. So Bruce kind of brought Josh to the table. And, but, I love Josh's style. He's a young guy, but he's, what they refer to as like a first call guy in Austin. In other words, like when somebody comes to town and needs a drummer, he's one of the first guys that they call. So he was, vital to the feel of the album. And as far as the rest of the instrumentation and the players, Larry Chaney, who has produced several projects for me over the years and is a, old veteran, session player from Nashville, and just a good friend of mine, plays a lot of the guitars on the record. Then we have another friend of mine named Chad Pope. He's a Fort Worth guy, but he's been in Austin and Memphis and Nashville over the years, and has a real kind of bluesy feel, plays some slide guitar, and he actually I take it back. There's another co-write on the record. Chad and I co-wrote Born Down in Texas, which has this really cool.
That's bluesy. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I love that one. Mm-hmm.
So Chad definitely helped me kind of take that to the deep end of the blues pool, and plays a slide guitar on that, and also too on the song American Dream. My other friend, a good friend of mine, Cullen Fox, who plays in Charlie Crockett's band full time. He plays all kinds of stuff, like, the kitchen sink. I mean, everything. But literally he plays, piano, B3 Hammond organ. He plays the Fender Rhodes, which is kind of an old vintage piano sound that you don't hear very often, but he's playing that on a song called My Father's Son. Mm-hmm. He also plays some banjo on a tune called My Old Friend the Shadow. My Old Friend the Shadow. He's playing banjo. He's singing harmonies. He plays accordion.
Wow.
I mean, all kinds of stuff. And a trumpet. Yeah.
I heard that. Yes, you could. Yes.
Yeah. So he's probably got the most instruments played on the album. Cullen Fox does, and like he came very close to getting his doctorate in the trumpet, I think. So I mean, he's like a real like musical genius kind of guy.
Oh wow. And
when you see him play in Charlie's band, like he'll be playing the trumpet and the piano at the same time. It's wild. So having him on there was real cool. Also another great musician and just a great friend, a guy named and kind of a legend in my mind, a guy named Brian Duckworth, who played fiddle for Robert O'Keefe for years, plays some fiddle for us on the song Holy Grail. And it was a really cool just moment for me getting not Robert, but Brian rather, out to the studio. Brian's been a guy, he has a fiddle shop here in New Braunfels. And so over the years, I've spent a lot of time going to just, show up on his lunch break when he's not working on his fiddles and get him to kind of, listen to some of my songs, and has been sort of a mentor over the years, just as far as, encouraging me to pursue songwriting in general. And so to get him out there, and he knew Bruce from back when. And so Bruce actually plays an acoustic guitar solo on that song. And so I've got Bruce and Brian trading a guitar solo and a fiddle solo. And I mean, for a young songwriter from Texas, a moment like that, to have that preserved for posterity, I can't overstate the significance for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, I don't want to leave anybody else out. Who else do we get on there? That may be Danimal Johnson, who played for Hank III, who's Hank Williams III for years. Dan, really talented. He's playing pedal steel on Outlaw Highway, and he's playing some dobro on a song called Street Hustlers Blues. And then there's another steel player named Cody Angel, who's a prodigy. Was playing in different bands around Texas, prominent acts like Jason Boland and different guys. And then he recently moved to Nashville and picked up a gig with Josh Turner. So he's like, really on the road, And but so I think that's everybody, but stellar group of musicians to work with,
Yes.
you know, and you know, really proud to have had all those guys involved.
And I
Oh,
mean, honestly,
one
sorry.
more. Sorry, one
One
more.
more.
And a friend of mine named Chris Hughes, who oftentimes is in my in my traveling band, who's been, you know, been on the road with me some. Chris Hughes, young guy, really talented guy, and he plays some guitars on there too. I think that's everybody. So
Okay, now let's dig into the music, because I'm going to tell you, for everyone listening, when you go check this album out, if you haven't already, it's just so smooth. And that's why I wanted to talk about the musicians, because it's just absolutely masterpiece. So
thank you.
I mean, I had to pick some songs to talk about. I'd like to talk about every single one of them, but I know we
Sure.
don't have all that time. I really liked River Road, My Kind of Song, American Dream, Country Girl, Born Down in Texas. I just love the whole twist at the end with the Memphis Mama on that one. So tell me about writing and Born Down in Texas.
Okay, Born Down in Texas. So, you know, it's funny. It's one of those songs where the story is partly taken from my own life and from my own experiences, and partly kind of references some other friends of mine and their experiences. Like I mentioned, Chad had been up in Memphis for a while, and then we had also played a show with Dale Watson, who at that time was back and forth from Memphis to Texas, and so that whole just kind of, you know, the mystique of the blues in general, and the places that I feel like are a home for the blues, which includes Texas. And we have a lot of, you know, the great old bluesmen are from here, but also from New Orleans, from Memphis. So it kind of became this roadmap of you know, the spirit of the blues and where you're going to find it. And actually, you know, I had spent time in New Orleans years back with the legendary blues piano player I got to meet down there, named who they call Dr. John McRabenack. And so you know, who was kind of involved in voodoo and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was okay. I was going to ask you about that. Was that does that have to do with the Cherokee medicine man
Yeah.
whole story thing? I
Yeah,
ran across
yeah,
that. I ran
yeah,
across that. Tell me about that. That
sure,
fascinates me.
for sure. So yeah, when I was about 19 years old or so, I had gone with a friend out to go camping, and it turned out where we were camping was at Kinky Friedman's ranch out in Medina. And at the time, you know, young guy, I was, you know, back then I wasn't really fully aware of who Kinky was. Okay, but you know, he was running for governor at the time, for one thing. But I mean, you know, he's a great author and musician. I
Mhm.
love his last record he put out. So I, you know, since then I've gotten to really, you know, appreciate the legend and the legacy of who Kinky was. But at the time, you know, like I said, I was just, you know, we're going camping. Well, so we get out to Kinky's place. He's not there, but there's somebody out there kind of caretaking the place. And talk about a character. This guy's called the Reverend Goat. And the Goat and Kinky had been on the road with Bob Dylan on the Rolling Thunder Review back in '76. And the Goat is just this kind of like really fascinating, kind of little frail old dude, but a really colorful character, and a beautiful soul. And he had been living and embodying the whole the life of a Cherokee medicine man. You know, he was a street preacher, and he taught college classes, and just he'd written scripts with Dustin Hoffman, and just, I mean, like it. Uh, was it Dustin Hoffman, or no? It was Dennis Hopper. Sorry, but I mean, like the stories about that the Goat had just go on and on and on.
Wow.
Wild. But so yeah, so you know, and I've got we're pretty sure we have a little bit of native from my dad's side, and so you know, the Goat kind of instantly, you know, took a shine to me, and I played him a few songs, and the first you know, one of the first days I met him out there, I was playing my guitar for him, and he kind of he got this old it was a buzzard wing, and he kind of danced around while I was singing, and like blessed me with his buzzard wing, blessed me and blessed my guitar, and it was just this, you know, this whole kind of like ceremony, this beautiful thing. And anyway, we became friends, and like I said, he'd been evacuated from New Orleans after Katrina. So at some point, he asked me if I would move him back to New Orleans, and so I did, and then I got to go down there and meet just like I said, Dr. John and other native medicine men that that live around the city of New Orleans, and so I really got kind of a crash course in native spirituality and voodoo and all these different things that for a kid from a small town in Texas was all pretty eye-opening stuff. But so the reference in the lyrics to I've been down to Louisiana chasing that voodoo thing, and at the end at the end of that line, I'm like, take me back to Texas so I can hear the angels sing. It's like at a certain point it all kind of got to be a little wild for me, and I was really ready to come back home and find God and find get back to my roots. So yeah.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing that with me, because my curiosity was so up. I was so with the whole Cherokee medicine man thing. Let's talk about another one of the singles. It's really a touching song, the Father's Song.
Yeah, My Father's Son, sure. So one of the major overarching themes of the record is about finding God and me starting a family and it touching on, I've been sober now for almost 3 years in January, which happened as a result of having a kid and then finding God, and it's like the natural progression of things that happened to me, and so a lot of those things worked their way either subtly or in a more pronounced way into the songs and into the stories. But so My Father's Son, it was really a way for me to try to kind of pay homage to my family line, starting with my grandfather, who I never got to meet, but it's one of those things. I mean, so when I was born, my dad, was drinking a lot and stuff like that, and so. But because his father, my grandfather, had been a war hero and all this other stuff, but because of that had kind of been absent from his life, he made the drastic decision to get sober and to really to be there for me when otherwise he might have left town and whatever else he would have probably just kept on rambling right down the line like he had been on for years before that. But so yeah, and then of course when my son was born, I was kind of at the same crossroads where I'd been living the kind of rock and roll musician traveling lifestyle and partying and all that stuff, and I really had to look at my own life and examine what I was going to do about the opportunity to be a father. And so it's just this whole kind of like dichotomy of and two, by the way, my son I named after my grandfather, because even though I'd never met him and even though he wasn't really there for my dad, I've always felt like we had something to be proud of in the fact that my granddad fought in World War II and was a real American hero in my eyes, and his name, by the way, was William Washington Burrow Jr. He was born on the 4th of July.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was a master sergeant in the Army Air Corps. He survived D-Day and made it through the war unscathed. And then my dad was a hippie and grew up in the 60s and 70s, and was a hitchhiker and a rambler and hung out with guys like Townes Van Zandt, and he was a roadie and just has all these crazy wild stories of about back in the day that I heard growing up. And then of course when I came along, like I said, he got sober and then he actually started running triathlons and became a school teacher and got his act together enough to be a dad. And then and the last bit there about my dad is that Dallas was his alias at one point when he was on the run from the law.
Really?
Right. so I inherited that name, and I inherited that kind of wild spirit. And
I was wondering, I was going to ask you about your first name, if there was any significance there. That's a great story.
yeah, it was, it's definitely a wild story, but yeah, so then, like I said, I, traveled and had wild adventures of my own for years, and partied and all that stuff. And then when my son came along, it was, uh, it was just kind of this coming to Jesus moment sort of thing,
Mhm.
where I realized, it's like my dad was there for me, and I'm going to be there for my son. And but I'm not going to overlook the legacy of my grandfather just because, you know um, just because he may not have been there for my dad. He was there for our country when our country needed him. And so I wanted to make sure that my son would be aware of the legacy. And so I named him after my grandfather. And so my son's name is William Washington Burrow III, but we call him Tex. Okay. But so that the song My Father's Son starts with my granddad, and then goes down through the story of my dad, and then my story, and then it ends with my son. And so it's it's definitely one of the most personal and kind of autobiographical songs I've ever written, and I'm really proud of it.
You should be. It was so touching for me because I too had a grandfather that served in World War II. He got pulled out of a little bitty town close to Sealy, Texas called San Felipe. Sealy's my hometown.
Wow.
And
Okay.
got shipped to San Diego and got thrown he was a Marine, and he was in Japan and got thrown on those islands. And for so long growing up, I didn't get to hear a lot of stories. I was very close to my grandfather. As a matter of fact, he's the one that taught me how to fish, and fishing is my passion.
Right.
And so
Wow.
that was really touching. And then it's just like, and I like the part about, I just made a note about passing down the name and how important that is, and the heritage, which takes me to another song that I really like because I'm a small town girl, and I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoyed Independence Day.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, Independence Day for me is it's very autobiographical too, or is I was really trying to capture the essence of the feeling of growing up in a small town, and two, it was during the last year or two when a lot of our normal activities and celebrations were all called off, right? Just because of the health scare. So I kind of wrote it to try to like um, celebrate those things that we were missing out on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's talking about the county fair and the Ferris wheel, which so we actually just had the county fair pass through town, and the line is heading down to the old county fair. Hope I might see you there. Talking about kissing or stealing a kiss on the Ferris wheel. So I just a couple weeks back got to take my girl and our son on the Ferris wheel and steal that kiss and do that whole thing.
Oh,
So,
love it. I love it. No,
yeah,
really, really. I'll think of that every time I listen to that song, but I
yeah.
really liked that. And so you've got some good stuff here. And I know that you're doing a lot of shows. I was looking at your schedule. So
Mhm.
what's your live shows like?
Yeah, I'm playing as much as I can, and working toward getting out on the road more in the next year or two, hopefully. But I'm either oftentimes I play solo. It depends on the venue.
Hmm.
I really enjoy just the solo kind of troubadour singer songwriter thing. I get to tell stories
I
and
could see that. Hmm.
connect with the crowd, because I mean that's when you really study songwriters like I have. So much a part of what a great performer and a great songwriter does is tell stories. It's not just about the music. It's about really like giving people a window into that world that song came from. And then when you get to perform the song for them, it really connects on this whole other level that it really takes it home.
Yeah. Yes.
But then I have a full band too, and so and which I love. It's a whole other thing when you have a great band around you. It's like driving a Cadillac or something, or it's such a treat to get to play with great musicians that share that artistic vision for bringing your songs to life. So yeah, so we're playing as much as we can, and loving every minute of it.
Well, and then one other thing, outside of all of this stuff that you're doing, you have the Redbird Listening Room.
Yes, ma'am.
You are busy.
Yes, ma'am. Yep. Yeah. So the Redbird is I mean, it's right there in the name. It's a listening room, and it was inspired by places like the Old Quarter in Galveston, by Kent Finley's Songwriter Circle at the Cheatham Street Warehouse, which I mentioned earlier. There's some other famous ones. Obviously, the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville is a great example. And when basically in the past few years, my family bought this piece of property, and it had this old house on it, and at some point, my mom, who's really, I have to say, the visionary behind the whole, the Redbird really coming to life. She kind of brought me over into the backyard of this place. We have a really nice backyard out here, and we were looking at the back of the building, which at the time, it had been boarded up for years and was just kind of a wreck. And she just kind of looked at it and asked me to look at it with her, and could I see any potential in turning this place into a music venue? And honestly, at the time, it seemed so far-fetched to me to be able to salvage this place. But I have to tell you, through my mom's vision and a lot of hard work by my family and friends and myself, and some some really skilled carpenters and stuff that we brought in, this place has transformed into just such the most beautiful little room. It's all old beadboard and shiplap and longleaf pine floors. It's all reclaimed materials out of old houses that have been torn down around. Actually, a lot of it came from in the Smithville area out near Bastrop. But it just came together so cool. We have some old church pews in the back of the room. We have some old theater seats out of like vintage theater seats, and then some lyre back chairs. And so it's in a kind of eclectic mix of seating. And we seat about 60. We sell 50 or 60 tickets depending on the show. And we've had just some of the most extraordinary songwriters come. Just a few days ago, we had Susan Gibson, who wrote the song "Wide Open Spaces" that the Dixie Chicks made famous. Who's kind of definitely a hero amongst songwriters, especially around here. And she was trading songs with a couple of other guys who I consider to be, masters of the songwriting craft. A guy named Al Barlow and another guy named Mark Youngers, which is one example of some great shows we've had. We've also had Dale Watson. We're going to have the Reverend Horton Heat coming next year. We've had, some of the other great songwriters like Jason Eady and Shake Russell, who will be here this Sunday with Michael Hearn. Michael Hearn's uncle, Bill Hearn, will be here at the end of the month. Jamie Lynn Wilson's coming. We've had Courtney Patton, Adam Hood. We're working on getting some other great songwriters in here. But so it's been amazing to me. Like I said, I was skeptical in the first place, but I've just been blown away. I mean, we've had just incredible show after incredible show, and the space is really beautiful. And so if anybody's ever around New Braunfels, Texas, and in the mood to get up close and personal,
I want to go. I would love to. I'm putting it on my list. Absolutely. Love that story. And the great thing is y'all put so much love and heart and passion and your soul into it. So that's just good stuff. Well, it has been a pleasure visiting with you. And where is the best place for people to find your music? Where do you want to direct?
Yeah. So, the first best place to go to is just my website, which is dallasburrow.com. Dallas like the city, Burrow, BURROW.com. And you can find my tour schedule there, and that'll direct you to, places you can buy the CD or the vinyl we've got coming here soon, and also to Spotify and Apple Music and all the places you can download.
Yes, it's a great project. It's great music. Self-titled album. It's came out in July?
Yep.
If I remember right. Yeah. So it's, I'm telling you, it's a must for everybody to listen to and to download and to have in their library. Plus, I enjoyed Southern Wind also.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really proud of that record still too. And I appreciate you digging in and listening to that music.
Oh, I'll continue to listen. So thank you so much for joining us, Dallas.
Oh, it's been an honor. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk to you about the record and about the Redbird. It's been a pleasure.
And with a heavy tongue, she knew where I was from. As she left, I dared to say, well, you can go to hell. Hell, I'll go to Texas. I've had my fill of every place but home.